Hi, folks. Welcome to Inclusive Collective, where we share stories and learnings of inclusive people, organizations, and innovation. I'm your co-host, Nadia Butt. I'm an organizational development and belonging strategist, and I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Rob Hadley, a people and culture strategist specializing in DEI and people analytics. Hi, Rob. How are you this week?
Hello, Nadia. How is my energy today? Is that good? You
It's
feeling it?
pretty high. I know. You said you're a little sick. You feeling a little sick, right?
A little under the weather,
Okay.
but so that just makes me sound more like I have executive presence,
Yeah.
right? And I'm just kind of tone it down a little bit.
No, I think it sounds great.
How's my executive presence?
I'm
That's what I
always
should
on
ask you.
par, always. So I got a really random question for you. You're gonna be like, why is she asking this? There's no reason why I'm
Okay.
asking this question, but I'm just curious.
Okay.
Would you rather explore the depths of the ocean or outer space?
Is this a facilitation exercise?
No, absolutely not.
Icebreaker?
It's a good icebreaker, but like there's no learning objective to it. Do you know what I mean? It's
There's
just sort
no,
of
there's,
like it's just for fun. Yeah.
I think space. I think space.
Okay.
I'm a little worried about being underwater. I have this fear of
Ooh.
like the depressurization and like your head exploding.
Yeah, sure.
I went scuba diving one time, right, without lessons
Okay.
in the Barrier Reef.
Oh, wow.
And like there's like no lessons, and they just give you a tank and they just send you down with the tank. And they're like, so if you hold your breath,
Yeah.
your lungs will explode. And that was like the lesson.
That is
And I was
so
like,
frightening.
well, so I have no interest in ever being
Yeah,
underwater and
now
having
I
my
don't
lungs
either.
explode. They probably explode in space too, right? So yeah, count me out for both. I like
Would
the
you
Earth.
take what is it? The SpaceX? Is that what it's called?
No, I
Oh,
would not. No,
no.
I'm staying on land. I'm fixing this planet,
Got it. Oh,
right?
okay. I like that.
I'm working on this
All
one.
right. That's fair.
So let's talk about this week's top DEI stories. A lot going on,
Lots
Nadia.
going on. So this is an interesting story. So this past week, Uber's chief of diversity was put on leave after she hosted sessions about race that were called "Don't Call Me Karen."
Mm,
So I don't know if you read this, Rob, but Bo Young Lee, the head of diversity at Uber, was asked to step back and take a leave of absence while Uber determined the next steps after there were employees that were complaining about these sessions. So it's interesting. These sessions were intended to discuss the American white woman's experience and have a dialogue about
mm,
race. But
okay.
workers instead felt that they were being lectured on the difficulties experienced by white women and why Karen was a derogatory term. And so people felt like there was a lot of conversations on Slack that were like the internal Slack page that were happening that New York Times had insight into. Many of the employees felt that Bo Young Lee was dismissive of their concerns. And then employees felt that the event organizers were minimizing racism and the harm that white people can inflict on, marginalized groups of people like the BIPOC community by focusing on how Karen is a hurtful word. Any reactions to this?
So many things to think about there. And I
I
am curious
know.
on your thoughts about how to actually have some of these sensitive conversations. But, like most people, when I saw this, I groaned. And, this goes back to what we talked about last week with Uber centering the discomfort of white women in having some of these conversations.
Sure.
We talked about belonging as well as being a way to center the comfort of white people last week. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of tactical errors here, right? Like using the term Karen. I don't think that's like an official term. There didn't seem like there were experts on this kind of dialogue present. It seems like, again, they were dismissive. So their aim and their focus was off. But then I also thought, Nadia, and you have this experience as well. I thought about my own experience in big corporations. And so we don't have a ton of context about why this happened or what the thought process was around
Right.
it. And the CDO was put on leave, but we've been there, right? And so
Yeah.
you end up doing things that everyone knows is wrong when you work in a big corporation
Yeah.
because someone in a position of power wants you to do it, right? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of emperor has no clothes scenarios, right? So it's not a huge leap for me to imagine that, let's say the CFO named Barbara, and I'm just making
Yeah.
names up. This
Sure.
is not a real person, but, said, hey, I'm tired of being called a Karen. So let's do some programming for white women. And the DEI team tries to pull something together,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, we need a little bit more context about why this happened, what their thought
Agreed.
process
Yep.
was. And then I also think it's really easy to put the DEI leader on leave,
Mm,
right? I
mhm.
mean, like executives F up all the time and they don't go on leave. They get
They
coached,
get coached.
they get brought back, they get the opportunity to make more mistakes. So I do think that there's not enough context, but there's a possibility that it's just really easy to put the DEI leader on leave and not work through this as an organization.
Yeah, I would agree. We need more context. We need to understand this a little bit more, have more information. I do think that oftentimes in large organizations, because the DEI teams tend to be, they have resources. There's people on the teams, there's talent. I don't know how hand in hand they work with learning development professionals where their focus is really like creating learning objectives and creating things not in a bubble, right? Like leveraging
Hmm.
people and teams with like employees to really create the program. Also like piloting programs. So again, I don't know if they took this approach, but like learning development professionals are big believers of like we have to pilot a program to get the feedback and then adjust based off of the feedback. That's a very big component of instructional design. I'm not saying that they didn't do that, but I feel like if they had done that, they would have received this feedback in more of a private setting to then make adjustments if needed. So I've been
Hmm.
reflecting on that a little bit as well, is like we can't create things in bubbles.
So Nadia, you wouldn't get everyone together and have a conversation on how difficult it is to be a white
I,
woman. You wouldn't do
I
that?
wouldn't do that.
No.
I also feel that there's healthy discourse that should occur, and how we handle that discourse, there's ways that people can still learn from it. So, again, we don't have all the context. I was sad to see that they put her on leave. I think you make such a great point that people should really start to think about how do we coach. It's almost like the cancel culture, right? It's like this woman, I believe, has been in this position since 2018.
Hmm.
Again, we need more context and information. That's all.
And I've
The
heard from
input.
people that this is a very thoughtful executive and
Yeah.
very strategic as
Yeah.
well. So, you know, I, so now it makes me think I was at the Utah Diversity Summit last fall.
Mhm.
Yes, we have a diversity summit here in
Yeah.
Utah. And so the governor of Utah was on stage, and the very first thing that came out of his mouth was something like, I don't believe in systemic racism.
Yeah.
He's a Republican, so it's like climate change for him. You could
Yeah.
just not believe it. It's
Yeah,
something that
it doesn't
exists. But
exist.
and his chief diversity officer was on the stage with him, and she just had to nod along, right?
Yeah,
But she knows what's the right way to do things, and obviously, um, sometimes you get caught in a situation where you're doing the wrong thing. So I have a little bit of sympathy from a corporate perspective. The way it's reported, tactically, just so many errors in the way it was executed,
yeah.
and a conversation that we should be having, especially in big corporations, where a lot of times white women are doing pretty well if you look at the data, and women of color are not doing so
Right.
well, right? Like we need to have the conversation about
Why the
how
different
white women
disparities
should
still
be
exist.
allies
Yeah.
and how they should bring along, women of color, and particularly Black women as well. So
Yeah.
that's the conversation that should be taking place,
Yes.
and hopefully that's what the direction they go next.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what happens, what Uber decides to do moving forward. So I will keep my eyes, on the lookout for that. I might follow this woman on LinkedIn.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, hope for the best for everyone, obviously. So, next thing, according to NPR, the latest workers calling for work-life balance are airline pilots.
Okay.
So you may remember in March, airline pilots secured a very big pay raise, but they're now calling awareness to their work life balance issues due to a pilot shortage. Airlines have lengthened trips to meet demand. And what
Okay.
were once 1 to 2 day stints on their schedules are now 4 to 5 days in a row, destroying their family life. And, with some being away from home for 15 days or so in a month.
Mhm.
And it also causes huge problems with the schedule if like the first leg of that trip goes wrong, right? Then other pilots are called in. So it's kind of a scheduling disaster. So
Right.
you looked at this. What were some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we kinda had a similar, discussion last week about the exotic dancers protesting for, like, fair compensation and just safe working conditions, and so, I think we have to keep continuing to protest and fight for things that we deserve, and work balance is huge, and I travel is booming right now. I don't want a tired pilot, flying my plane.
No.
So I think, protesting and continuing to fight for what you think you need, and making that vocal is really important. I mean, that's how laws like child labor laws are instituted, is by protesting. So let's support them as much as they need. I know that this was one airlines that we kind of that they mentioned was United, and like the picketing that was happening outside of Dulles, which is interesting because that's a airport that I fly into quite regularly. But I know that Southwest had this issue back in December or in the fall
Yeah.
sometime. So this is pretty common in that industry, I think. And they got to get what they need, because I do not want a very exhausted
You
pilot flying my
have
plane.
do you know any
I
pilots,
do.
Nadia? They're so exhausted and they nod like, do you ever have stories? Like, I'm not gonna out like some of the folks that I know,
Yeah.
but they nod off all the time. I do like that you pulled it back to the exotic dancers. I also owe the exotic dancers an apology because I think I used the term strippers last week. And I think that's a more catchy term in terms of like promoting the show, but they are dancers. They're very skilled professionals,
Yeah.
obviously. But I like that you pulled it back. Maybe some of the pilots should do some of the tactics that those dancers
Yeah.
used in getting some right. They had runway shows and they dressed in really cool
Yeah.
costumes outside the
Yeah.
airport. So maybe they should do that. But
Maybe
let's not forget that
with
how
the
we,
uniforms that the neutral
yeah, the gender
the
neutral
gender sorry,
uniforms
I
that
couldn't
are
think of the
available in
word.
Alaska
Yeah.
Airlines and Virgin Atlantic.
Yeah.
But let's not forget how we actually got here, right? So before the pandemic, these airlines bought massive amounts of their own stock,
Right.
enriching their management and shareholders, then demanded a bailout from taxpayers. Then the government, led by the president at that time, Mr. Super Negotiator, Mr. Art of the Deal, right? So he made this deal that the airlines got their money from the government only if they didn't lay everyone off until like September 30th of 2020.
Uh,
So on October 1st, guess what they did? They laid off a bunch of
yeah.
people, right? So strike one for former genius president.
Yeah.
And then they offered huge amounts of these early retirement packages to pilots as well,
Right. I remember.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so they did that, right? So they laid people off, they offered early retirements. That gets into the point that we are now, right? So inflation, and when demand came back for flights, obviously there's just not enough pilots available
Right.
to be able to pull this off. So they made a series of errors here, and it's the public that pays for it in terms of inflation,
Mhm.
in terms of like how much it costs to fly anywhere, and it's the pilots and their families for them not being able to spend time and have adequate support. So
Yeah.
definitely support these airline pilots, and it really should be held accountable from the perspective of management. Someone should be held accountable on the airlines. I know that's not
Absolutely.
true. That's never going
Yeah.
to happen. So
Yeah. Well, we hope. One can hope.
anyway, that was a rant. I went to a rant.
That's all
Sorry.
right. That's great, though. Well, that's it for the deets. Folks, we'll be right back with our guests, Leah Abel and Olivia Hatten of Circus Up. Hi, folks. This week, we have such a treat for you. We are joined by my good friends, Leah Abel and Olivia Hatten, team members of Circus Up, a Boston-based nonprofit that breaks down social barriers through circus arts. Leah is a founder and executive director and head instructor at Circus Up. When Leah is not coaching circus and tackling systemic inequities in the circus arts community, she works as a Boston Children's Hospital, and performs with the Duo Aerials act Abel. An alum of Imago Theater Group, Leah also performs with Clowns Without Borders. She holds a master's degree in social work from Simmons College and a master's in environmental law and policy from Vermont Law School. Olivia, performing artist, dancer, actress, meditation guide, and yoga instructor. She is trained in traditional indigenous Afro-Brazilian, Hawaiian, and Ghanaian rhythms and movements. Has been trained in continuous intuition and environment-led movement. Formal dance training also includes jazz, ballet, modern, house, and hip hop. Rob, I feel like we should get lessons. Olivia also teaches African dance at Roxbury Roots Montessori and studies and teaches yoga at the Jackson Youth Camp. Welcome, friends, to Inclusive Collective Podcast.
Hello. Hi, we're happy to be here.
Leah and Olivia, it's so great to meet you. You may not believe this, but we don't get a ton of circus arts experts here. So can you start us off
Weird.
with telling us what is included in
Well, circus arts, what's great about circus arts is there's kind of a bunch of different things that are really typical in circus arts. So you can think about partner acrobatics, where people stand on each other and make different shapes. Tumbling, which is similar to gymnastics. Aerials, which is things that hang from above that we can climb up and work together to make different shapes on together. Juggling, and did I say balance already? Maybe balance. But then what's awesome about circus is that if you have an audience that is interested in watching what you're doing and you can make a fantastic story or a spectacle, then it is included in circus. So that can include different forms of dance. That could include everything from jump rope to, juggling with a soccer ball. Any of those things would be included in circus. So we kind of have our core disciplines, but the ability to add anything into it.
And is there an age limit
Very
for circus arts?
No.
So anyone,
Yeah.
any age.
Yeah, that's true. It can truly be any age. Yeah. You start circus arts with whatever background you have. And then you go and build your skills from there. So often people are like, there's no way I'd be able to do that. And it's not about starting at the very top, right? It's like anything that you learn that's new. You start with the skills and what you have, and then you build on that. And what's great about circus arts is that because there's all these different disciplines, there's usually a few things that people will gravitate towards. So maybe it's the balance and the juggling, and maybe the tumbling is not their thing, but they learn some tumbling, or maybe they really love aerials and they'll learn some juggling. And so you get to try and learn all different kinds of skills and maybe become more of like an expert in one or two of those areas.
So I came to the circus with a lot of dance experience. Like I've never done any type of circus before. I did gymnastics when I was like 4 or 5 or something, but I like didn't really do it. I just hid a lot in the fun things. But I've been dancing for a while, and so yeah, it's been really fun to like translate my dance skills and experience into the circus world, and then also to learn like more specifically circus skills like juggling and different aerial things.
Sure. So when we talk about Circus Up, and in a moment, I want you to share kind of what the mission is and so forth. But I'm curious if, in general, you've observed any sort of um, disparities in the circus arts world as it relates to like the intersection of arts and maybe justice. What are some of like your observations that you've taken into account
Sure.
or experienced?
I'd say that to start with, circus arts for a long period of time was handed down through families, and then also folks who literally would run away with the circus, right? And so the circus would often accept folks who, had been like this. We're talking way back when, but would accept folks who had been imprisoned and they couldn't get any other jobs, right? Because you kind of get blacklisted by that. And circus, was like, oh, that's fine. Many circus companies. And so as it's changed and transformed, a circus has become more of a recreational thing, similar to maybe yoga. And so because of that, and because of high insurance costs, et cetera, and space, like renting a space that is suitable, it's become extremely exclusive in terms financially. And then often also that goes along race lines as well. So not necessarily, but it can, right? So the circus became, it's really transformed the space, and it's also transformed who the performers are, because circus is now more the folks who can afford to get the best training are then the folks who end up in the touring shows. And that has changed what the art form and kind of what is being showcased has looked like. And so Circus Up is a social circus program looking to change that. There's other social circus programs all around the country and all around the world. So we're not the only one by any stretch of the imagination. And so we all get to learn from one another and what we're doing and take what works, and then also say, this is what works for Boston that may not apply, from somewhere else. Mostly it's a huge financial barrier that then translated into other kinds of cultural barriers.
Yeah, that was my hypothesis going into this. So tell us a little bit more about Circus Up, and so the mission, the vision, the values, where it came from, and what you hope to accomplish.
So the mission of Circus Up is Circus Up uses circus arts to overcome social barriers and build community with people of all ages, backgrounds, and abilities. That's the mission.
Mm-hmm.
Our vision, which also answers what we hope to accomplish, is a world where inclusion is the model, access is the norm, and play, creativity, and diversity are celebrated. So we hope to create spaces where people of all ages, although we're definitely a youth-focused organization, feel a sense of belonging where they can express themselves creatively. Oh, there it is, creatively, and feel supported by each other and the coaches and their larger community as well.
What are the youth learning? Like, what are some of the programs that you have in place?
We have programs and after-school programs, in-school programs. We do workshops. We have a community troupe called Kirkos, which is a performance-based youth community troupe, and they have shows all around the greater Boston area. They have, I think, 16 shows this year already, booked already. And so we have summer programming, and then we have a scholarship program as well.
Tell me more about the scholarship program. So, Olivia, I know that you had worked on that. What is the purpose of it, and why is it necessary?
It's basically like Leah said before, circus classes are not cheap at all. And a lot of times they also take up a good chunk of your time too. So between the time and the money, they're not as accessible as you would hope. But with the scholarship program, we've been helping people. We've had 25 students so far go through the scholarship program, both youth and adults. And we've been able to cover all or some, depending on like the financial situation of the individual, of the circus class of their choice, which is really cool. And I have the pleasure of like talking to all of the applicants. We have like a quick Zoom meeting where we talk about like what they are interested in, if they have any questions, and it's really nice to hear people, express their interest in wanting to move, and engage their bodies in like a super fun way, and also like how that physical engagement translates to like a mental engagement, um, because any type of circus skill is like a little mind bending. There's this like book or text that's in the Circus Up classroom folder, about juggling, and it talks about how juggling, both like doing it and watching it, creates like new neural pathways in the mind. It was just so cool. But yeah, and so doing that, and then especially doing that for people of color and people who like without this program would have had a more difficult time like achieving that, or just being in spaces where they're able to do that, without the stress of like, how do I have to budget this between like what I'm gonna eat or like how I'm gonna pay my rent, which
So it gives them more like resources and access to be able to afford this in their life.
exactly.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's also really nice to bring some color to the spaces where the circus classes are offered. I think, that's a benefit for everybody involved.
Can you expand on that? When you say bring more color to the spaces, what does that typically look like?
Yeah. So the first time that I visited the studio that we practice at most frequently, I was like the darkest person in the room, which is I'm not like, you know, um, and not that anybody, like, did anything, like explicitly to make me feel uncomfortable or to make me feel like I was an other. there is still that like, like one of these things just doesn't belong. I think it's like a Sesame Street thing or something,
Yeah.
Yeah.
one of these things is not like the others.
Yeah.
And so like there's that feeling of kind of being like on edge a little bit. I think for everyone, whether that's conscious or unconscious, because there is a sense of established community in a space, and then when somebody comes in who is not an established member of that community, there's a little bit of hesitation, and all of these like implicit biases can come up and
Further harm people
yeah,
or
and just
yeah.
inform the way that we interact, um and we don't even know about it. So it's really nice to bring people of color into a space where these a lot of people probably are not interacting with a lot of Black people. A lot of people probably aren't interacting with a lot of people whose first language is not English, um, and they're not seeking those out, again, intentionally or unintentionally. But it provides an environment where you're creating those connections, whether it's by just like, oh, hey, like we're in the same class and like making eye contact and being like, oh, we live 5 minutes away from each other. Yeah.
Do you find that, of course, you just kind of listed off some, the communities in which there's a lack of representation in certain groups of people and identities. Leah, you had mentioned that circus arts is obviously international. I'm curious if that's also the case, if there's underrepresentation in terms of race or gender. Is there a predominant group that kind of takes up the space internationally? And then also, what are the other forms of identity that you have experienced or observed that are underrepresented in the circus arts in general?
I think, I'm not an expert in the like international circus scene. I sort of like know what I know, but it's not like I dug super deep. So I think it really depends on what company and what organization you're working with. I think it's pretty specific. I think there have been some organizations, some companies, some circus companies that have really changed the representation in the last few years that are being very intentional about who's performing. I think that there has always been, like in any group of people that come together, there's tension, especially when there's kind of pre-existing issues around race or class. So I think that's always been true, and there's groups working to do things differently. I've also worked with Clowns Without Borders for a long time, and we partner with other Clowns Without Borders teams from around the world, be it like Colombia or France or whatever. So that's an organization where I've seen folks from different backgrounds come together and work for the huge majority of the part really, really well together with a common language, and also being able to be like, I'm inserting my culture in this way and you step back. I mean, now it's your turn. And like, now it's a mashup and it doesn't work, but that's hilarious. So I have seen it also work really beautifully together. And not without conflict, but conflict doesn't mean it's working. It's just part of it. Right. So I don't know that I'm the person to answer for the entire international circus community, just kind of my experience in it. But I think it's both worked and not worked.
I'm thinking about Kirkos, the youth community troupe, and how like so when we're practicing, part part of I think Leah's intention in inviting me to the team was to because of my dance experience, was to bring like um more dance to the performances, to the acts. And so we've been encouraging that. And a lot of times my direction is like, dance to the kids. And they dance, and they do the dances that they're familiar with and that they know, which are often like,
Sure.
like the fun, popular like TikTok dances or
Sure. Pop
a lot
or
of pop,
something.
like a
Yeah.
lot of like hip hop and like Jersey, like a lot of like Chicago influence, and a lot of Black American influence in dance. And I think that like that is something that we don't really see in circus performances prior, like in I think in Boston, and in America, especially within like the last however many years, there's been you know like Black music and dance is like super popular, obviously. But in terms of like when I think of circus, or when I used to think of circus, I thought of like Cirque du Soleil, or so very like elegant, like
Yeah.
you know
It's like classy. Yeah.
exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's really exciting to see like what's happening when we give the kids, you know, do your thing, and then they work the dances that they and the songs that they know and that they listen to like on the regular into their circus acts. And I think that has like a lot of really cool potential. And it's something that I haven't seen before. I'm thinking now of like the Harlem Globetrotters. I think they do that.
Yep.
But yeah.
I think also there's, I think for our organization, there's also lots of representation that we don't necessarily have, right? So there's like, there's lots of different kinds of representation. There's so much diversity, right? So we have a group of like 8 or 9 kids. So we're not going to get every single kind of diversity in that 8 or 9 kids. And that will probably, if we're just being realistic, that'll probably always be true. So I think there's all different kinds of diversity that we're absolutely missing. And um, and in some ways, I think that's okay. Like, I don't think we need like one person from every like niche to be like, and now it's complete, right? And that's not our goal. Our goal is to have it be a welcoming space where anyone could feel they could come in, but we're not like handpicking to say like, this is what we're missing, so you must join this group, right? That doesn't feel natural or good. So I think that there's, like I said, there's like all different. I think there's a difference between creating an environment where people will, for the most part, feel welcome or feel that difference is invited and okay and celebrated, and saying, yes, we have a representation of everyone. Those are kind of, I think, two different things.
It's been so great having you. So much fun to think about some of these things. We usually ask our guests at the end of the show for some recommendation on a resource around diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I just open it up. Is there anything that our audience should be paying attention to in the world of circus arts?
So, and to answer your question, a resource is, everyone should keep reading all of the resources that there are out there, by all means, but that we think that it's more important to come experience it and come be a part of it. So, for example, Kirkos has, like I said, I think 16 shows lined up. It's on our website. Almost all of them are open to the public. So you can come hang out with us and experience it to see what it's like. And if anyone thought that was a genius thing that I just said, my wife told me to say it.
I'll admit I thought it was genius as you were saying it. So yeah.
I'm not going to tell her that. It was also Olivia's idea too before she said it. Yeah.
Well, my resource is your own body, to get into your body a little bit, move around safely and respectfully.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the final resource, I'd say that everyone should listen to this podcast. It's been really eye-opening. It's called The Inclusive Collective. So you all should check that out. It's really great.
Thank you. I didn't pay her to say that either. Well, Leah Abel and Olivia Hatten, thank you so much for joining us this week on Inclusive Collective. Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back with our calm reflections and raves and rants. Welcome back, folks. So we just finished chatting with some team members from Circus Up. Rob, I loved talking to them because I have to tell you, of course, I'm friends with Leah, prior to meeting Leah, I knew nothing about circus arts. And
Yeah.
just in attending some of the events and um, watching her, it's incredible what some of these artists, what their movements are, just their creativity and the work that they do. And I love that there's this focus on really bringing social justice and
Hmm.
equity to the circus world. So, what were your takeaways?
Yeah, yeah. No, I really liked at the end, Leah had stated that it's not really about checking off boxes in terms of diversity. And it's not diversity bingo where we're looking to get one of everyone to come to our organization. It's about creating a space where everyone can be themselves and be free and be very free in their movement and how they perform. Right. And so I thought that was a really beautiful sentiment. The one thing I would remind our listeners is that Circus Up is an organization that thrives on donations. And we didn't get to it with Leah and Olivia, but you can go to circusup.com and you can set up a recurring donation, which is what, all, small organizations need is they need to be able to count on that money coming in at a regular rate. So just, donate what you can if you get a chance. There's also a shop, so you can get some Circus Up
Some
gear
swag.
there as
Yeah.
well, which that's probably where I'm headed after we
Yeah.
finish recording this show. So again, thanks so much, Stuart, Leah, and Olivia, and super excited to have some different perspectives on the show today.
Absolutely. Rob, what time is it?
It's time for are we ranting a little bit?
Yeah, we're ranting. I think you are taking the lead in that.
All right, so I'm gonna rant. I'm gonna start with it's about football or football of the global sort,
The
futebol, as we
sport.
say in
Oh,
Brazil.
okay.
Brazilian-born star Vinicius Jr. or Vini Jr. of Real Madrid has been subject to many racist taunts and behaviors over the past 2 seasons, culminating in 7 people being arrested this last week, 4 for hanging an effigy off of a bridge in Madrid, and 3 others being involved in a racist chants in Real Madrid's game versus Valencia. Both incidents are being treated as hate crimes. So my rant is for the president of La Liga, the Spanish league, for not taking action to protect one of the best players in the world. Well, I mean, it doesn't matter, but as a star player, obviously. And these are the people that make him rich by going out and sharing their talents with the world. He claimed he didn't have jurisdiction to intervene, and even said Vini Jr. shouldn't speak about it publicly. So we know that's absolutely bullshit, right? It's not true. For example, here in the U.S., when we see this type of behavior, leagues are very aggressive to make sure they protect their players, because again, that's who creates value for these leagues. And so, rant against the president of La Liga.
Yeah, do better. All right, well, let's end on a positive note here. So, Rob, you know that my focus, my research focus is on religious identity in the workplace. So I was really
Right.
pleased to see that Intel, the organization, was named the most faith-friendly company according to the REDI index, which uses a variety of measures to assess a company's friendliness toward religion and belief. I love this because people's experiences are not monolithic, and it's great to see that organizations are recognizing just that and providing spaces to people who belong to a particular faith, and giving them the space to to either identify with and feel supported. So really good
Yep.
news on that.
Yeah, and I dug into that a little bit, Nadia. And so my worry when we talk about religious inclusion here in the United States is that's code for how do we bring Christian perspectives into the workplace
Right.
above all others. But it really looks like this list does a pretty good job of thinking through the fact that there are many religions
Yeah.
here in the United States and ranking the company. So
Agree.
definitely a positive thing, and it's definitely a big part of diversity, equity, inclusion work.
Absolutely.
All right, Nadia, that is it. Fun episode. Inclusive Collective is a production of Rifelion Media. We would love to hear from you. Send us your feedback at inclusivecollective@rifelion.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, except for in Montana. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe and rate us wherever you get your podcast. If you want to get in touch with us for consulting, check out Nadia at nasconsultants.com, and check out me, Rob, at TacanoConsulting.com. Thanks again to our guests, Leah Abel and Olivia Hatten of Circus Up. Again, you can go to circusup.com to make a recurring donation. Nadia, we will see you next week.
Be well.